Rapper Kid Cudi is now on the stand in the Sean Diddy Combs sex.
Did he help the prosecution as much as I think he helped the prosecution?
Welcome back to Legal Lens, your weekly deep dive into the most compelling legal cases making headlines. Today, we're dissecting some truly explosive testimony from the Diddy trial, specifically focusing on a major celebrity who took the stand.
That's right, Sarah. I mean, this was a huge moment in the trial because he's one of the biggest celebrities to take the stand. And when Kid Cudi entered the courtroom, it was just silent. All eyes were on him, and Combs was actually looking directly at him as he entered. I think for all these people who have testified so far, it's probably their first time in a federal trial.
Absolutely. And from what we hear, Kid Cudi seemed at ease, but also, I think, understandably stressed to be there. When he got up to the stand, he talked a little about his history with Cassie. Can you break down what he said about that relationship?
Sure. Kid Cudi said he met Cassie in 2008, and they eventually made some music together. He claims it was actually Combs who asked him to collaborate with Cassie. At first, they were friends, but then their relationship turned romantic.
And this is where it gets complicated, right? Because he had no idea during the year he was dating Cassie in 2011 that she was also dating Diddy.
Exactly. At one point, Brian Steele, who cross-examined Kid Cudi, flat out asked, "So she was playing both you and Diddy?" And he said, yes. He also testified that when he got to know Cassie, she did say she had been in a romantic relationship with Sean Combs and that he had been physically violent. Now, he also clarified that he was not aware of any sexual violence.
Okay, so that's a significant detail. He also talked about a really disturbing incident from December 2011, which involved a break-in at his house. What did he say about that?
This is wild. Kid Cudi talked about an incident from December 2011 when Cassie called him one morning around 5:30, 6 a.m. She was very stressed out. She told him Diddy had just found out they were dating and had asked for Kid Cudi's address. Cassie apparently gave him the address and was very, very worried about what Diddy was going to do next.
So Cudi's reaction to this?
He said when he got that phone call from Cassie, he sprung into action, although he was confused about why it would even matter if Sean Combs knew he was dating Cassie, because he had no reason to believe they were still romantically involved. Remember, Kid Cudi had been dating Cassie, he says, for about a year at this point. He went and he got her from her apartment and took her to the only place he thought would keep her safe, which was the Sunset Marquis, a hotel in LA.
So he picks her up, takes her to the hotel, and then what happens?
While they're there, they get a phone call from a friend of Cassie's who said, "I'm sitting in front of your house right now, Kid Cudi. Sean Combs and an associate of his are inside your house." And that's when he was like, "What is going on?" He said he was angry, so he got in his car. He said it was a Porsche 911 convertible. And on his way to the house, that's when he started to get worried. What am I walking into? Could Combs have weapons? Who else could be there? Could this turn violent? Although he said he did want to fight Combs for breaking into his house.
Understandable. So he calls 911. Does he confront Diddy?
He called 911, but he also called Combs directly and said, "Why are you in my house? I'm on my way." So when he got to his house, Diddy wasn't there. What he did notice was that his surveillance cameras were turned the other way. Some Christmas presents from Chanel for his family were unwrapped, and his dog was in a bathroom with the door closed. He said he was looking around, didn't see Diddy. He calls Diddy again, "Where are you?" And Combs is like, "I'm on my way to your house." But Combs never shows up. The police show up, and Kid Cudi files a police report.
Wow. So after all of this, there were text exchanges and then another incident involving his car. Last week, we heard Cassie testify about Combs threatening to set fire to his Porsche. What did Kid Cudi say today about that?
So Kid Cudi and Cassie stopped dating after this whole incident where Combs allegedly broke into his house. On this particular night, he's staying at an ex-girlfriend's house. Early in the morning, he gets a call from his dog's babysitter, who's house sitting for him. And she says, "Your car is on fire in the driveway."
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So he instructs her to call 911. The authorities and the fire department show up, and then he calls a friend to go there and start taking pictures of his car. When he gets there, authorities are already at the scene, and what they find is something called a Molotov cocktail.
So, it was intentional.
Absolutely. It was a bottle with liquid in it and a rag that had been set on fire. Somebody had cut the roof of his convertible and dropped it inside. We saw pictures of all this damage today, and he said, unfortunately, his car could not be repaired. Police collected all this evidence, and there was some sort of an investigation.
So, again, Brian Steele really tried to use that to Diddy's advantage. That's quite a description. I bet the courtroom reacted to that.
He did. Steele, who's a very famous attorney out of Atlanta, who represented Young Thug in his state RICO case, he got up there and really tried to poke holes in this idea. He said, look, there was an investigation. Nobody was charged. And they even took DNA evidence and fingerprints at the scene. What connects Combs to this incident? He asked, because all we really know is that Cassie said that Combs threatened to do this, but there isn't any security footage. There isn't any proof that Combs either told somebody to do it or actually did it himself.
So, after all this, did Kid Cudi ever see Diddy again?
Kid Cudi says that the very next day after this car incident, he actually meets Diddy at Soho House. He was like, enough is enough. I'm going to call Combs. So he calls Combs, we need to meet up. They decide to meet at Soho House, which is this very famous private members-only club. Kid Cudi arrives, and Diddy's head of security, D-Rock, takes him to this conference room. He actually described to the jury that when he walked in, Combs was looking out the window with his arms behind his back, and he said he looked like a Marvel supervillain. They did. The entire courtroom started to laugh. So he's describing how they're both talking about how Diddy didn't know that Cudi was dating Cassie, and Cudi didn't know that Cassie was also dating Diddy. He said after this meeting was over, he stood up and shook Diddy's hand, and that everything was calm. There was no screaming, no threats. But he said to Diddy, "So what are we going to do about my car?" And that's when Diddy said, "What are you talking about?"
So, again, Brian Steele really tried to use that to Diddy's advantage.
Exactly. Steele really tried to poke holes in it, saying, Combs never said that he did this to your car. What proof do you have that he is the one behind this? So again, this at times was a very heated testimony, right, with Kid Cudi recounting these really tough times that happened to him, but then also Diddy's attorney, Brian Steele, really trying to poke holes in what his version of the truth was. And there were these moments of laughter, too, because, you know, Kid Cudi is very charming, and he's up there, and he didn't know when to talk and what, you know, maybe objections meant and sustained and all of this, because again, this is really foreign for everybody that's in there.
After all this, did Kid Cudi ever see Diddy again?
He was asked, did you ever see Diddy again after this incident? He said, yes. A few years later, he actually ran into him at Soho House. Diddy was with one of his daughters. And Diddy actually approached him, shook his hand, and said, listen, I'm really sorry about all the BS that happened before. But again, he wasn't specific about what he was referring to. But Kid Cudi did say that that brought him peace, that he wasn't expecting Diddy to apologize, and he really moved on with his life, obviously until this federal trial came to be.
Right. And he had some strong reasons for quitting.
Something else that stood out to me today, Sarah, is this morning, a former executive assistant of Combs named George Kaplan, he testified. He did. He said he quit his job because he didn't like how Combs was treating Cassie Ventura, and he also didn't like how he was treating another woman he was dating named Gina. He stressed that he really had strong moral principles, but he also said that he didn't want to testify, that he was forced to be there because the government subpoenaed him.
That's a crucial point for the jury, isn't it?
It is. He still has some love and respect for Combs, saying that Combs made him a man and really taught him what hard work was. He even said it was his Harvard working for Combs. He admitted it was difficult for him to be there in the same room as Combs because he really didn't want to testify. So, will this really matter to the jury that some witnesses didn't call up prosecutors and say, listen, I have information, I want to testify? They were forced to be here and recount these memories.
But ultimately, he's speaking his truth, and they are talking about these incidents of violence against Cassie Ventura, which goes directly to the sex trafficking charge against Diddy.
Exactly. And when you're hearing Kid Cudi up there, right, saying that perhaps Combs was the one who orchestrated his car to have this Molotov cocktail thrown into it, that goes to the racketeering charge. So again, it's a big question. Is a jury really going to believe beyond a reasonable doubt that Combs sex trafficked Cassie and other women, and that he was running a racketeering conspiracy with his businesses?
It's clear Diddy's legal team is putting on a really strong fight, trying to poke holes in everything these witnesses are saying. But the prosecutors also are bringing their own receipts as well. It's going to be fascinating to see how the jury weighs all this testimony.
Absolutely. A lot to unpack.
Indeed. That's all the time we have for today's Legal Lens. Thank you for joining us.
And we'll see you next week for more updates.